Wrestling fans, a night to remember. Saturday, September 21st, the Picture Perfect Event Center, Jackson, Tennessee. Memphis Wrestling Hall of Fame ceremony comes to Jackson for the first time ever. The Rivalry of the Ages presentation to Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee. Also, Handsome Jimmy Valiant, the Rock and Roll Express, Danny Davis, and tons more. Exclusive meet and greet at 3:30. Event to follow. Go to MemphisWrestlingHallOfFame.com to purchase tickets. Saturday, September 21st, Picture Perfect Event Center, 2310 North Highland, Jackson. A night to remember.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Retro Wrestling Review USWA podcast. I'm your host, Gene Jackson, and as always, it is my pleasure to welcome my co-hosts, Josh Briley and Richard Mulliken. Whoa, wait a minute. What's happening here, guys?
I painted my room.
Y'all aren't together. Y'all are the P3 radio guys. You guys are always in the same little box. Like, this is weird.
I'm on house arrest now. I'll just put that out there. No.
I was going to kayfabe that, but yes, Josh is no longer allowed to leave his home. We're going to have to record like this now.
And unfortunately, I live too close to a school for him to come over to my house. So
hey, it's not that kind of house arrest.
Take it easy, Ken.
yes,
here we are, filling up your screen like never before. Myself, Josh Briley, and Richard Mulliken, collectively now known as the second family of WrestleCopia. So,
oh Jesus!
If there can be multiple first families, I guess we'll finally be the ones that decide to be the second family. We'll take the hit for everybody. So, coming off last week's show featuring the never-ending promo from Jeff Gaylord, that was the lead-in to D.Q Palooza down at the Coliseum that Monday night. I'm excited to see if we're able to get things back on track this week. How do y'all feel?
I'm excited to see our new favorite enhancement talent on this week's show. I'm also excited to see what's going to happen to Mr. Uncle Danny. Because he's been on a winning streak here lately, and I'm excited about that. And I want to see how far the Harlem Knights have gotten in our development here, because like I said, they've been getting better. So excited about all three of those things.
And judging from the thumbnail, with all the War Games outfits and stuff, it seems like something big is going to happen. But yeah, we'll just have to see.
That thumbnail of them in the War Games garb is a real attention getter, because that episode has probably gotten more views than any USWA episode that we have on the channel. And I put a couple of those pictures up on Facebook last night, and on Twitter as well, or X, whatever it is these days. And it's getting a lot of likes and shares. And if you missed that, follow us just like the other 6,458 people have. Follow us on Facebook. We have a lot of fun over there. We share a lot of content related to the USWA. Join the USWA Universe group. We're well up over 300 members in that group. We share a lot of fun stuff there. So we appreciate each and every person that's following on the Facebook, that's in the group, and more importantly, that's listening to the show right here on the WrestleCopia podcast network. So without further ado, let's get going. We start the show exactly the same way we started last week's show, with the first family out doing another photo shoot as Dave and Corey open up the show. And again, it was a fun way to get them out there early.
I was confused at first because I was like, am I watching last week's episode?
I did the same thing.
I swear to God, yeah, I had to go back and look and make sure I had watched the previous episode all the way through. And I'm like, I did. And this is the same shit. Okay. And I confirmed different outfits. It kind of pissed me off because I'm like, are we going to the well too many times? I mean, like, once is funny, but the second time it's kind of like, like we're spanking them again. You know what I mean?
you can tell that we didn't go to the well too many times because nobody ran in yet, Josh, on that photo opportunity.
Well, I wasn't going to admit that, but I hit the back button on my controller and went back and I'm watching last week's again, dummy. And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. No, this is it. Wait a minute. What's happening? And then I realized, no, like you said, we're going right back to the well the very next week. So we're starting off a little rough in my opinion, but as we return from the break, because of course we always open the show, we go right to a break. And as we return from the break, we immediately throw the footage of the Moondogs versus the Harlem Knights last week. So I feel like as much as we kind of anticipated that, and we talked about on the show how we were looking forward to seeing what a Moondogs Harlem Knights match might look like, let's take a little look at some highlights, or perhaps just the end.
Splat nailed away on Bobby Knight of the Harlem Knights. Drops the leg down on Bobby Knight. Splat again. Big splash. He's got him covered. Oh, boy. Here comes Flamingo and Christopher. Christopher with a metal chair. Nails Big Moondog splat with it. Nelson Knight of the Harlem Knights going to work on Big Moondog splat. They throw Paul out of there. Flamingo, Christopher, Harlem Knights. Boy, they all jump on the Moondogs in there. 14 minutes, 56 seconds. Referee Paul Neighbors calls for the bell. Here comes half the King, General Lawler, Jeff Jarrett.
After reading the results last week, that went exactly as we expected, right?
Yeah, I mean, everything I thought was going to happen happened.
I mean, Brian and Scotty run in, and then everybody else. So that went exactly the way we thought. More on that later. We'll talk about that as the show goes on. But so match number 1 this week, we're going to see the Harlem Knights in action with Mike Samples taking on Tim Sadler and Brian Kelly. And keeping with the trend, we always have to check out footage when the Harlem Knights are in action. So let's check out not a whole lot, but a little bit of this Harlem Knights squash match, if you will.
Hey, with our opening bout of the day, and Mike Samples right along as usual.
Yeah, that's right. I'm right along ringside to tell you something. These two men in the First Family are the muscle. You understand? They are the cornerstones of my First Family, the greatest collection of wrestlers in the world. Just watch what happens to them, and watch this guy.
Yeah, look at Samples. Watch Mike Samples. Head over. Watch. Man over here, he's supposed to be out.
This is devastation, all right, but it's not in its finest form. It's in maybe one of its most disgusting forms.
Ring, too, while you're at it. Nelson Knight picks up Bobby Knight, throws him off the top rope, right on Timmy Sadler. Now, they got the bout pin. Yeah, he's got him. That's 1, 2, 3. Now they can get out of here. They got the win. The Harlem Knights and Mike Samples, part of the First Family, and here with the 1, 2, 3. Now they can hightail it.
So I don't know about you guys, but it looks like to me the Harlem Knights are finally getting acclimated to the Memphis style, because there wasn't much to clip there, because besides the 2 spots that I left in, the rest was mostly all punching, kicking, and choking. So after a few weeks here, the Harlem Knights are slowly becoming the Moondogs, or perhaps the other name that Josh said that we won't repeat here. Did y'all get that vibe, or is it just me?
Yeah,
I noticed. Well, you go ahead, Richard.
No, go ahead, Josh.
I was just going to say, I noticed they were doing some blatant cheating crowd spots, like where they were trying to antagonize the crowd, and they hadn't really did that before in their matches. And it's the same kind of spots, but still, it seemed like they were trying to become like Memphis wrestlers, with the tactics that they're doing and involving Mike Samples and everything. So it felt like a different kind of Harlem Knights, but if they're going to stay long, which we all know they're not going to, but still, if they're going to stay long, then they're going to have to acclimate themselves to the way we wrestle around here.
Yeah, I think the big thing that you notice in that clip is two things. It's like, one, you notice they're involving the manager, and I wish my step uncle would have kicked me as softly as Samples did on that opponent, because he really cracked ribs. But Samples doesn't look like he would break an egg with those stomps. I'm sorry, they're god awful. But the other thing you notice is that in weeks past, what they would do was they would beat down a guy, and then they would throw him in his corner so he could tag out so they could beat down the next guy. Now they're actually doing things where they're throwing the guy out of the ring, and then they're hitting his opponent cheaply on the side of the apron, which makes them even more heels. So, like you said, I think they're growing in their Memphis style, which also will play good when they go to the WWE, because they're learning a different thing to do. Because when you go to the Land of Giants, you can't just be the only Giants beating up everybody.
Yeah, I agree. I know last week we kind of talked about, was Mike Samples the man to thank for the lack of the dues, as you guys call them, that god awful noise they used to make frequently in the ring. And I feel like this has got to be Mike Samples at work here as well, teaching them like, hey man, this ain't an exhibition of moves where you just take one guy, do every move you've ever known, throw him over, get the next guy, go through all those same moves a second time, and then pin them. Because that's what we've been seeing week in and week out. Now, granted, I was like, well, here's a segment where you can put over Mike Samples. And then Richard talked about how awful the kicks look. And they did. That's fair. It's absolutely fair. But yeah, you could have interchanged this match with any Assassins or Interns or Fire and Flame match from the past in Memphis. And it's just your classic big guy heel tag team. They're choking guys on the ropes behind the referee's back. Like I said, they're getting Samples involved. They look like a classic heel team from Memphis. Now, some people would say that's good. Some people would say that's bad. But to me, you run the risk having, collectively 850-pound guys doing double drop kicks and all these sort of cool moves that I think eventually it could have potentially turned them babyface. And then you would have had people wanting to cheer the Harlem Knights, people wanting to cheer PG-13, and where would your heat be on the heel side other than Brian and Scotty? So I think we're moving in the right direction with the Harlem Knights. One thing I did notice, I don't know if y'all caught this in the clip, but as Bobby is going up for the rocket launcher a la Midnight Express, if you look, Sadler has gotten up to his feet. And it's like, is he going to throw him for like a crossbody? And then by the time Bobby dives, Sadler's back on his back. So he must have, had he been in frame the entire time, I'm sure you would have saw him stand up, look up, see Bobby go, oh shit, and immediately just lay back down. Luckily, the camera didn't caught that. The camera just caught him on his feet. And the next time you saw him, Bobby Knight was crashing on him. You really didn't notice it, but it caught my eye. I was like, if he throws him off for a crossbody, this is going to be amazing. But
maybe it was
corrected.
Maybe it was supposed to be a crossbody and he had internal bleeding and just collapsed.
He's like, no, we're not doing this. I'll take my chances on the mat. So then we go to another break, and when we return, we're going to see highlights from last Monday night's Brian Christopher versus Jeff Jarrett match. And it goes much like the previous match. All the same guys came out. All the same thing has happened, leading to another disqualification. Now, we're not going to go on that rant again. We went on that last week, and we're going to come to find out that maybe that was all by design. We'll talk about that some more as the show progresses. Then that leads us into match number 2 of the day. Brian Christopher with Mike Samples taking on TD Steele. Brian is sporting his trunks that say no touching across the backside, which probably would have been more humorous if he was wearing them when Bert was still around, but anyway, still gets a little more offense in here than we're used to. It was a good little match, but Brian puts him away with the Tennessee Jam, if you will. But again, like we talked about with the Knights, we see Brian doing some heel stuff. He's implementing Samples. I don't have a clip of this one, but what did you guys think of this match?
That Tennessee Jam I've taken before. And I think I took the exact same one that this guy took right here, because you could see it hit him right in the bridge of the nose.
Oh.
It was, I remember I took mine, and Brian looked at me, he's like, sorry, man. but I mean, it looks good. It looks so good from Brian. I was always a big fan of that move until I took it. Then I was a guy that sympathized with the guy taking it. But no, great stuff from Brian here. I mean, here's the thing. Those Memphis rings, we know how bad they are. Aside from Mabel, have we seen anybody really come off the top rope with any kind of move like that? Like, not the top rope. Mabel was even coming off the second rope. So, I mean, to have Brian coming off the top rope in a free TV match in one of those horrible rings, that says something about him.
Yeah, that's the one thing that stood out to me is that Tennessee Jam looked so good, and they replayed it, I think, 2 or 3 times before the show ends. So I mean, like it to me, I remember this being one of the spots in the tape whenever I just rewound it over, watched it over and again, because it just, like Richard said, you didn't see guys in Memphis doing that, and it felt like one of the home team guys was doing a move that cool that we usually only saw Beautiful Bobby and, just very few other people do.
Well, that's why I always felt it was fair to call it the Tennessee Jam, because in my opinion, Brian was one of the only guys who could execute that on the level of Bobby Eaton. Only person I think ever really came close to doing a leg drop off the top rope that was as good as Bobby Eaton. So, yeah, I'm glad to hear that I wasn't the only one that stood out too, because yeah, it was definitely to me the high spot of the show as far as moves in a match that we see here in the studio. So when we return from the next break, we go to another clip from last Monday night, but Dave Brown says something here that tells us last week's DQ Fest may have been done intentionally. Let's check out this clip. You'll hear what I'm talking about. Then we'll see a little bit of the action from Scotty Flamingo challenging for the unified world heavyweight title last Monday night at the Mid-South Coliseum.
We were close to a record this past week with disqualifications in USWA matches. Why? First family comes out and interferes in these matches. Another example right here. Jerry Lawler going against Scott Flamingo. Watch.
Takes Flamingo and Bulldogs. Scotty the Bobby Flamingo. To reset the match. Lawler had Flamingo pinned. Had a pin 1, 2, 3, and Christopher came running out here. Put Flamingo's foot on the bottom rope and told referee Paul Neighbors that, hey, he had his foot on the bottom rope, Ralph. Paul said restart it. Flamingo nails Lawler. Hey, but look at that. Lawler on the bottom rope that time. He had his foot on there. Hey, hey, hey. Christopher grabs the unified world title. The King had his foot on the bottom rope. Paul Neighbor says, ring the bell, get it started again. Lawler grabs Flamingo. 1, 2. Here comes Christopher. He and Flamingo jump Lawler in 14:22. With the King into the rope. Double clothesline on Lawler. Flamingo and Christopher jump the King and Paul Neighbors. Jeff Jarrett out to help Lawler out. Here comes the big Harlem Knights and Mike Samples in there.
And so on and so forth.
Right.
Well, clearly the multiple DQs were done to build towards something. However, I still don't love it because, let's be honest, that's not the first time we've had more than half the matches in a DQ, including the main event. And plus, you had Wolfie and Coco ended in a DQ, and technically PG-13 is not in the first family. So why would you not do a clean finish on that match, at least, if you're just trying to establish that, the first family is running in on all the matches, causing disqualifications? I mean, what do you guys think? Does it make you look at it any different than we did at the end of last week's show? Especially had you been there and paid to see it.
Yeah.
I mean, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Josh.
Well, we need to establish. You go first, I go second. We're not in the studio together anymore, so we're
Bedroom rules.
1-2. Yeah, so I'll just go first. I mean, yeah, another fuck finish. So hopefully it is building towards something. I mean, obviously watching the show, you know it is. But yeah, if I'm there, I'm super pissed off. And I'm probably not going to ask my mom to take me back because I'm so pissed off. And, you know, it did look like, I mean, like, it would have been interesting to see Scotty win it on a fuck finish, you know, and let it build big that way. And it could be something that would mean something even more than just they've been running in on everybody, you know, and now they got the belt. That would be something, you know, and Scotty, it wouldn't seem unfathomable that Scotty would be the unified champion. I mean, he was a big name somewhere else, and here he is now. I mean, let him hold it for a week. But, you know, they take that away, and then immediately Brian runs in again. So it's like we got fucked twice. I was really exhausted after watching this clip.
Yeah, the same with me, you know, and you can only have it happen so many times. It's kind of like if you were in school and you were sitting in math class and the history teacher busted in and started teaching history. It'd be funny the first time, right? And then by like the fifth or sixth time, you'd be like, we get it. We want to learn fucking math. We've got to live. Yeah, I mean, I would be so frustrated as a kid watching this that I'd be looking more towards the entranceway to see who was coming out than I would be staring at the match. With all that said, I will say, Scott Flamingo, as Corey Macklin called him there, really got screwed out of that belt, didn't he? Like, he won the belt, and then the referee, for no reason at all, it didn't even look like he checked with the crowd, just was like, "Now I'm gonna restart it." I'm just gonna I feel like
Lawler said that Brian pushed his foot off the rope. Like I said, Lawler's word was good enough. He's the boss, but we're not supposed to know that. He didn't even do the ask the crowd thing, like you just pointed out. Is Lawler's like, he pushed my foot off the ropes. He's like, restart the match, like all like adamant, you know. And then and I did some checking too. You know, we had talked about what Scott Flamingo, that sounds so weird. What Scotty Flamingo's status with WCW was by this point. And yes, they did bring him back to do a European tour, and they immediately fired him after that European tour. So at this point, he is no longer employed by WCW. And in fact, he is getting looked at by the WWF based on the tapes they were sending him from Memphis during this time. So seems like a perfect opportunity to put the belt on him for at least a couple of weeks. And to me, you get more heat off of Scotty stole the belt from Lawler than Scotty tried to cheat and you immediately reversed the decision, did a schoolboy roll up for Brian to bust in and do the fifth disqualification of the night to end the show on. Yeah, I understand that they had maybe a reason behind it. I still don't like it. I still don't think it was the best way to get where we're going, especially where we see the details where we're going. And again, we'll save that for later. And if I haven't said so yet, Richard, nice t-shirt. So,
thank you. I'm since Josh isn't here, that's the only thing I'm wearing right now.
Winnie the Pooh in it.
Yep, Donald Duck.
Yeah.
I was about to say, if Delbert Jenkins was here, he would say that you were either Donald Ducking it or Winnie the Poohing it, depending on what kind of mood he's in. It's Sunday morning, so it might have been Donald Duck.
I'm Tubby. We can go with Porky Pig in it too. I'm open. That's almost as disturbing as Scott Flamingo's very detailed outline of his weenie area in those freaking singlets. Have y'all noticed that? It's disturbing to me.
Man, that dick's got him choked up literally by Stone Cold in the WWE. I think Stone Cold talked about it in his book, said he was just walking around nude. You think you're a badass, that big hog? And choked him.
Well, thank God you guys pointed that out this week. Our good friend Brian Trammell, who watches the show every week and sometimes offers comments, messaged me and is like, I can't believe nobody mentioned the outline of Scotty's hog in those tights the entire match. So Brian Trammell, who's always on Hog Watch, was very disturbed that none of us brought it up. So Richard, last week he pointed out his ass crack.
Yeah.
And this week he pointed out his hog. So you were in tune with BT. I don't know what that says about you or anything else, but well, I mean, you know, it's whatever you're into. It's 2024. We're not going to judge you, you know. But
that's me.
There's a reason that as you look at the screen right now, Richard's on bottom. If that means anything to you at all, I'm
ladies.
Sure but yeah, Scotty Flamingo being called Scott Flamingo. I picture him in a suit trying to get an office job somewhere. He's moved on from wrestling. He's trying to change his persona.
Scotty sounds so boyish. I'm trying to be a big boy. And he goes and like raps for him and shit.
Flows with that, but yeah, he shows up. He's got a suit on. Still got the bandana.
He would be the only son of a bitch that would rap during his job interview at this point and think that it was a good idea. I don't get the raps.
And of course, his greatest attribute would be that Weebles wobbles, but he don't fall down. He would end with that, and then like boy, and walk out of the interview.
I'm the perfect guy for the job. Write my name down, boy.
Thank you for calling AT&T.
I got it.
This is Scott Flamingo. Like to sell you
formerly Scott the Body, which just didn't work for some reason. So as we go into the next segment that we're moving into, I need to let everybody know that this is sponsored by Jerry Turman's CBD and Vape Emporium, Tanning Salon, Paintball, and 24-hour pawn shop and taxidermy service. Plus, he also wanted us to let you know he still does taxes, but by appointment only. So you got to call ahead. He's right off of Mount Moriah over there in Memphis. Give him a call.
Can't we just show
also
it
known
up
as
Hard Times Jesus.
That's right, baby. Hard Times Jesus, if you will. Well, let's see Jerry have some hard times against. Well, now I feel inappropriate talking about him having hard times against Scotty Flamingo based on what we were just talking about moments ago. But I'm sure BT is going to be checking closely. Let's take a look at this clip or listen if you're listening.
Scotty Flamingo is headed this way. Scotty Flamingo is headed this way. In the ring right now, Jerry Turman. Mike Samples behind Scotty Flamingo. So far today, it's been all first family. Harlem Knights out here running wild over their opponents. Brian Christopher had a bit of a tough time with TD Steele, but beat him.
What's the deal there? Where's my music at?
Music's playing.
I don't hear it. I can't get in front of you. Pull these shenanigans again. Me and you're going to have problems.
I hear the music.
Yeah, I hear it fine.
Folks at home hear the music? Yeah, the music's playing. The big men, I told you, they were the pillars. They're the muscle. Brian Christopher's the heart. This man, Scotty Flamingo, is the brains of the first family. He is so intelligent. I talked to him in the back. This man is well read. He speaks about 5 languages. He is knowledgeable on every subject. You know what he needs? He needs Corey Macklin's job. Corey Macklin's not knowledgeable on anything. We get rid of him. We put Scotty Flamingo out here, and he could add some class to this. He is, super intelligence. You know what a super genius is? He's about 5 points above that. IQ that they can't even register. This man is great. Here, the wrestling ring is up here.
Ring's over there. Come on now. Take him over there. Boy, it just takes Turman over here by the neck.
This guy, he's so ugly. Look at him. I'm begging you to give me a decent-looking opponent.
Come on, Scotty, get him in the ring.
Counts it, putting it high.
Yeah, Flamingo climbing the ropes now.
Here's Samples again.
Just an intelligent person wrestles intelligently. Have you seen how he has dominated the match with wrestling move after wrestling move? Not one time has he had to resort to any, cheating. He's a wrestler.
Well, he got the victory. 1, 2, 3. Scotty the Body Flamingo, another member of the first family, and he was on with Mike Samples. Gets the 1, 2, 3 over Jerry Turman.
So ironically, Flamingo's music was perhaps the loudest, most clear music I've heard on this show since we've been watching. And he immediately comes over and complains that I can't hear my music. And Dave and Corey are both just incredulous, like, I hear the music. What are you talking about?
Somebody was getting a Zoom call in there, didn't it? I thought I was getting a Skype call in the middle of that, his music. I was like, what in the world is that noise?
I haven't figured, even though it was loud and clear, I haven't figured out what that song is. I don't know. I guess me and Scott Flamingo didn't listen to the same music back in the day, but
That's
I
like
realized
some
that Jerry
weird night.
Turman. Go ahead.
It's like just some weird 90s rave music or something he probably heard at a weird club or something he went where he developed his Scott Flamingo persona at, you know.
It probably
He was
doesn't have an
hot
actual
that it wasn't
title.
loud enough.
It's probably just weird 90s rave music #2 or something like that. But I did notice that two things I noticed about Jerry Turman in this one, aka Hard Times Jesus, as you guys have billed him. He looks like his father might, or his son might be the Necro Butcher who would come along later. They have a same vibe. And it also looks like Jerry Lawler definitely took his tights back from him, because those are not the King's tights he's rocking this
Dude, those tights that Jerry Turman was wearing, like, you ever seen pictures from the early 70s of like hotel rooms and shit? And it was usually the curtains, like just something weird jumble of colors and shit. Like, I don't know why he thought that was a good idea. Those in 1973 would have been all the rage. But 1993, I mean, his opponent's coming out there doing rave raps and shit. Like, and he's wearing shit from the 70s. It just made him look like shit even more.
He looked like he was from 70s big time wrestling in Detroit. If you go watch those old shows the Sheik put on from the 70s that are out there, they may even be on our Patreon if you take a look. But he looks like he's straight out of that. You're exactly right. Those tights, his look, his body style, everything about him, he looks like a wrestler from the 70s. Jumped out of a DeLorean, and now he's out here wrestling poor Scott Flamingo. I enjoyed Mike Samples on commentary for this match. What did you guys pick up on any good lines from him? Did you enjoy that?
Go ahead, Josh.
No, you're number one, remember? You're number one on the response.
We're going to have to come up with a hand-raising system or
Yeah.
a bell. We're going to have to ring in like a game show or something.
I didn't catch anything that stands out in my memory. That's why I was pushing to Josh, but Josh don't pick up from the cues.
Well, honestly, I only had negative to say because it honestly felt like for the weeks past, Samples was kind of lacking in the commentary, like he was preoccupied mentally or something. Because usually when Uncle Danny's wrestling or something, he had like 3-4 good lines. But with this one, nothing.
Was that coming through?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. I found the song. That was what I was looking for.
What is that? No, what is
that is KLF is Gonna Rock You. It's by Cyclone FPV.
Well, everybody knows that.
I would have thought it was by KLF.
I apologize.
Whatever
I didn't know that was going to come through. I was just looking it up. I squirreled on that. Sorry.
No,
that's
good.
my fault.
A little insight to what's happening when you're talking there, Josh.
Yeah, I can't remember what I was talking about at this point.
Your Uncle Danny, he had some good lines on your Uncle Danny.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was just saying, yeah, he just felt like he was kind of lacking in the punchline department, comparable to what he has.
I mean, I kind of wish they would bring Samples in, and unfortunately, it's not possible to bring Richard's grandma in to kind of roast Uncle Danny right before they induct him in the Hall of Fame, before whoever comes up to put him over, which I think is his other work nephew, Doug Basham.
No shit, Doug Basham's going to be there.
He's going to be there, and he's going to be inducting Uncle Danny.
Holy shit! I haven't seen Doug in probably 20 years, something like that. That's awesome.
I think you should be able to do that, Josh.
Oh no, I wouldn't want that.
You would want
to call him out. Go, I'm his real nephew. You're nephew by marriage. Challenge him right then and there to a match.
No, dude, for real. I used to see Doug and the real Danny Basham, not the Damager, the real fucking Danny Basham. His brother, who's probably 3, 4, 5 years younger than him. They would shoot after we put the ring up in like Elizabethtown, Kentucky, and places like that. And like, yeah, Doug Basham would eat me alive. Like, and I'm old now too. He could still probably do it, just quicker and shit. Like he's pretty brutal.
And for those that didn't know, there's a little bit of inside info for you. There is a real Danny Basham that is the brother of Doug, not the Damager from OVW. So that's the kind of insight we bring you, folks. It's not all fun and games here. We're not just here, dunking on people. Every once in a while, we'll pull out a fun fact like that. And then every once in a while, we're curious about a song, and Richard manages to track it down and answer for us, so we don't have to go around the rest of our day going, I wonder what the name of that song was.
Sorry about that, guys. I didn't know.
No, I'm not complaining, because honestly, it wasn't bothering me. I didn't know what that song was.
I hit play earlier, and I was like, okay, they can't hear that. And then I hit play now, and I was hearing Josh talking.
Josh stops in his tracks, and we're both just staring at the screen. You're like, can you hear that? Like we were suddenly hearing your thoughts or something. You're like,
we'll jump back.
God, I hope they didn't hear the other things I was thinking.
I was like, shit, I done broke it. Then I saw somebody move. I was like, oh no. What, did y'all hear that?
You didn't hear that other stuff I had rattling around up there, did you?
I did think it was funny earlier when you went to the clip and came back to us. I was like, thank God I didn't have my dick out or something.
I didn't even know that was on the table.
Like that one reporter?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Who does that?
Immediately, if you're out.
I'm a married man with kids. You got to get it in when you can get it in.
So I just do it right here.
There's some more insight, people. For those wondering, like, I wonder why those guys are in separate places now. Richard was insistent, like, oh gosh, you don't want to be here.
You don't want to be here for this when the oil comes out. I'm telling you.
I'm a big fan of these Scotty matches.
So
talking about his hog a minute ago.
Yeah.
His butt crack too.
And his butt crack.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Richard and BT are going to start their own podcast pretty soon, where they just comment on the bulges of different wrestlers and
joint webmasters at hogwatch.com.
But
welcome back to the Hogwatch podcast here.
Richard just does like a Corey Macklin impression the whole time.
We're here in Jonesboro, Arkansas, looking at hogs. I'll tell you who had a hog on him.
Home of the Razorbacks.
Razorbacks and bulge slacks.
All about hogs over there in Arkansas.
Shout out to my very best friend in the world, Brian Trammell. It's an inside joke that he'll get. And
I think I understand
comment on later. All right.
One thing we did overlook here, though, is our favorite jobber now, Hard Times Jesus. Every time he does this and takes a loss, I think in his mind, he's thinking, my father has forsaken me. As he takes a big knee, I feel like he wants to look at the crowd and going, I'm doing this for you. I love it. I love everything about him.
Speaking of knee, though, legit, I love the finish of this match. Like that flying knee from Scotty. Like it looked like some video game shit. Like people wasn't doing that kind of stuff in this time period, and he did it from the second rope. It looked great.
Yeah,
he did. Makes me almost wonder, was this another instance where somebody was standing when maybe they shouldn't? Because I've never before or since saw Scotty do a flying knee from the second rope like that.
Maybe that hog hit him in the face and knocked him out. That's what happened. It wasn't really a knee. It was a hog drop.
He got concussed. Hog to the dome, if you will. All right, I think we need to move on past this match.
CTE. Sorry.
I think it's time we take our first podcast commercial break. Let Richard down a bit, do whatever he's got to do during this long commercial, and then maybe he'll be able to get his mind back on the show here. So we'll be back in just a moment.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories, whether it's Jamie Ward with Georgia 81, Roman Gomez with the UWF in 1986, or Gene Jackson covering Memphis in 85. 3 projects going on right now over there at Regional Wrestling. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. Bob goes back in time each and every week, covering not just his career, but countless stories and interactions with hundreds of wrestling names spanning his 2 decades in the business. But that's not all. You can also check out the Pro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Pro Resu, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia.
Well, that didn't work out well at all. I mean, I know we just heard from Ray Russell about WrestleCopia, but the lead into that commercial did not have its intended.
Did you plan that?
No, I didn't. I forgot that's what the bumper was for this commercial. Honestly, as soon as that came up, I thought, "Oh, people don't think this is a bit. Like we set that up. Like this whole segment was to set that up." But I promise it wasn't. We don't plan that. We don't plan that far ahead. I promise you. So after the break, we find out that Monday night's card will be known as Wrestle War 93, and we'll hear the card for that later on the show, as we always do. I find that kind of fun because Wrestle War had been a staple of WCW for 3 or 4 years now.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden USWA is just using it. It's not like this is after WCW went out of business. They had just had Wrestle War 92 the year before.
To be fair, though, this is in April. Wrestle War usually was in February. So I guess they felt like, well, fuck, they ain't using it this year. It's ours.
Yeah. I assume so, but I felt it was kind of weird, but they make use of the theme later, so I'll go with it. So then we get a promo from the First Family about Wrestle War, and there's only one clip from this promo that I'm going to air. Brian Christopher says the Moondogs stink like what? Pay attention to one particular phrase in this promo and let me know what you think it sounds like Brian's saying.
Now, just a few seconds ago, Corey Macklin told me that Jerry Lawler, Jeff Jarrett, and the Moondogs have a little surprise for the First Family later on. A little surprise, Corey. Is that what you said? Well, Corey, let me ask you a question. Could the surprise be that they took a bath this morning? Could that be the surprise? I want to know. Because Dave Brown, them stinking Moondogs, and I repeat the word stinking, they stink to high heaven. Every night, and that's true, correct me if I'm not wrong, every night when we have to walk down the aisle and get in the ring, it stinks like funk. The people smell like goat.
The first time I watched this, I immediately had to rewind it because I was making a note, and I'm like, "What did he say?"
It stinks like funk.
It's like, whoa.
Yeah, I did the same thing. I was watching
Clearly
at the
he's
gym.
saying funk, but at initial listen, it does not sound like that.
Yeah, I was watching at the gym, and I was like, "Oh, what was that?" Like, you know how you just kind of barely listen to something. I was like,
Yeah.
"Did I just drop the F word right in front of Dave?" Just right there in front of God and everybody.
When Dave's head didn't immediately explode, I knew that couldn't have been what he even remotely said. But
no lie, that was exactly the marker that I looked for, just to see how Dave, like when I rewound it, I looked to see if Dave was reacting, and he did. I was like, okay, so it was. So I did the same thing. I looked at Dave to see if he said what I thought he said.
You better not say the R word around him, though.
Oh, just ask Scott Bowden. He hated. I had always noticed that, and then in one of the Doug Gilbert podcasts, we were talking about Scott Bowden. He brought up that Dave got really upset with him using that word. So, of course, Scott leans into it and says it like 5 more times.
Yeah.
I remember that clip. It was, you could tell Dave was shoot pissed. But you can say fuck, but you better not say that R word.
And he actually brought that up, Josh. It's funny you say that on the P3 radio podcast when we had Dave Brown on. He mentioned that the Scott Bowden thing was the only thing that really, when somebody was on the mic that said something that he got mad about.
Now think about that. Dave Brown was on wrestling for 30-something years. Mm-hmm. And out of all the guys that ever came on there and all the things they ever said, the only thing that went up Dave Brown's ass sideways was Scott Bowden saying that word. So, wow.
I mean, it left a mark that many years later that he brought it up to us.
Yeah,
so.
he's still fuming about it. He's like, still a bitch.
I think this was before, Scott passed, but yeah, he had mentioned it. I don't know if he'd probably bring it up now. Dave's very reserved in that, and I think he probably wouldn't want us promoting that podcast or this idea. But yeah, I mean, he said it at one time.
Any more to add to that, Josh, before we move on?
No, and yeah, I think you're right. Whenever he was on, it was before Scott passed. So yeah, I don't think he would really be happy that we were even mentioning it.
Guys,
so you're telling me he's not going to shoehorn it in when he's in Jackson co-hosting the shows? Like, what really sucked, guys? I'll tell you what wasn't a Hall of Fame moment.
I'm gonna need y'all to edit that podcast. Throw a pro shingle thing in there if you don't mind. Okay.
Throw up a picture of Snowbird there for a minute. Hey, kids, never use the word.
It really gets on Dave's ass sideways.
Dave hates that shit. Anyway, when we return from the break, Dave is getting ready to talk to someone when suddenly, out of nowhere, Macho Man Randy Savage music starts playing. And I'm like, oh, wow. I didn't even realize Savage was in the studio this week. This is going to be awesome. But it wasn't Macho Man Randy Savage. Suddenly here comes Lawler, Jarrett, Richard Lee, and the Moondogs sporting camo. And just in case, then I start thinking, well, maybe that's not Savage's music. You get oh yeah in the music. Just to let you know for sure, they are jacking Savage's music. Now, perhaps you could pull off this music if A, Savage wasn't just here very recently, and B, if they used a version that didn't have Savage saying, oh, yeah, in the middle of it, because those exist because they played it at every graduation that's ever happened.
I could see the sound guy, though. It's like Lawler's up there. He's like, look, I got this Army gimmick. What all tapes do you got? Well, we got Scotty's weird rave music. We got Too Sexy by Right Said Fred. Whatever that rap song the Harlem Knights have.
Into deep.
And then we got Macho Man's. Which one you want?
Like, I guess Savage's music sounds kind of Army-like, but yeah, I didn't even get the correlation of how that's supposed to even relate to Lawler's Army. But listen to it, folks, and see if you think this suits an Army making their way out into the studio.
Oh, I see what it is. Look at this. My goodness. Oh, me. You got the king, Jeff Jarrett, Richard Lee, the Moondogs. And they look like they are ready for a war, don't they? Wow.
Yeah, dig it. Yeah.
Hold on. King?
I have reached back into the past, and I have reinstituted Lawler's Army. And you can see it standing right here next to you. And this army is ready to go to war. And that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to go to war with you, punks. We're going to beat you at your own game. We're going to grind you into the ground. And we're going to leave you laying like the piles of garbage that you are.
For over a year, I was in boot camp with these guys.
That's right.
And for over a year, I took every board and every chair and every trash can and even the kitchen sink over my head. So believe me, Brian Christopher, when I say it, the general here has got his army ready. And Mike Samples, I have never been a boxer, brother, and you boxed me all around the territory. But one thing I've always been, brother, is I've always been a back alley street fighter. And this is right up my alley, baby. I got two of the baddest people in professional wrestling on my left. I got the other two baddest people on my right, baby. And Mike Samples, while they're beating the brains out of your goon squad, brother, I'm going to be beating your head in.
I'll let y'all lead on this.
So much. There's so much. Just hearing, oh yeah, Macho Man in the house.
Did you see how confused Dave and Corey both looked when that music started playing? He touches his earpiece, and Dave's like, Savage is here? Like,
yeah, the second
he
thing
looks
I
at Corey, and
noticed,
Corey's like, hell if I know.
second thing I noticed is how cold is that studio that all the wrestlers are continuously trying to start fires in their hands. You see them all the time, like behind. Let me tell you something, Dave. What is it, like 32 in here? Fuck, Dave. Well, I'm gonna kill Jerry Lawler, Dave. I'm gonna do it. And then the other thing I noticed, Moondog splat, right? Those jeans look fine when he isn't wearing a shirt. But when he's wearing a shirt, it is the most ridiculous looking thing I have ever seen in my life. It's tucked in too, which is the weird thing.
Yeah, that didn't do him any favors, tucking the shirt into the jeans. And of course, he looks like Cousin It with the helmet on. His hair is completely covering his face, which I'm sure is on purpose. But
then a part that stood out to me too, and I'm sorry, Josh, the last part that stood out to me, and it wasn't in the clip, Lawler at the beginning of this looks at Jeff and goes, suck in that gut. And I understand what he meant because he's trying to do like the movie army thing. I get it. But it didn't really translate that he went to the skinniest, like not skinniest.
You got Richard Lee and the Moondogs standing over there, and you look at Jarrett,
the most in
like
shape
the only guy who's ever drove by a gym in his life, and you tell him to suck in his gut.
Right. Sorry, Josh. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. So, well, here's my problem. I mean, like on the surface, it kind of looked cool. I mean, other than the way Splat looked and all that. I mean, I understand like the vibe that they were going for, because do you remember Wrestle War 91 and those like promo shots that they had? And it's even on the VHS, the front cover. It's the heels. You got Sid, Barry Windham, Arn Anderson, and everybody else. You know, and they're dressed in like the army get up, kind of like these guys are, but they look nefarious. They look like it's like a commando movie or some shit. But the vibe that the Moondogs and Jeff Jarrett and Jerry Lawler gave was like F Troop. You know what I mean? Just like a joke. If the Moondogs didn't look vicious, they looked tame. They were standing in line. You know, this would have never happened 5-6 months ago.
Yeah.
You know, the way that the Moondogs were. And now they're doing this fucking comedy shit. They don't have weapons, you know. Just
the Moondogs look like they were in a Benny Hill skit or something.
Yeah. Yeah. It looked really weird. Like, what I'm trying to say here is you can dress that way and have that garb on and be serious and it get over as serious. Or you could be goofy and it get over as goofy.
Yeah.
I guess the thing, if somebody was to tell me that Lawler was trying to secure a sponsorship with a local army surplus store, that would be, that makes sense.
Yeah, if we were shooting a commercial for them, then this is it.
Yeah.
You nailed it. We're trying to sell Wrestle War 93. You screwed us in every match last week, you sons of bitches. This wasn't it. Now, I will say this. I did take Lawler seriously. I knew Lawler meant business, guys. When he came out, he didn't even plug a softball game. He didn't give out Mr. Coffee's phone number. I was like, shit's done got real. Lawler's actually talking about wrestling right out of the gate, and that's unusual. But I will also say the one thing that stood out to me from this segment is, yes, the Moondogs look silly as shit. through the whole thing. Jarrett looked like he should be on that cover for the WCW Wrestle War tape or something. It worked. And by the way, Wrestle War, one of my all-time favorite pay-per-view names. I always loved that for WCW, especially once they started implementing the War Games with it. I love that cover you mentioned of the Horseman, and although Sid in an army helmet looked a little off. But I tell you who this suited. Richard Lee, I thought, looked more professional, looked more like a serious manager than I've ever seen him in those poor man Jimmy Hart, like country music Jimmy Hart or little Jimmy Dickens suits that he wears out there that look like they're 30 years older than him. I thought he looked good here. He looked like he was ready to manage the Truth Commission in 1996 rather than the Moondogs, but with the beret and tucked in, everything, I was like, Richard Lee, I'm actually taking him serious till he said baby a couple of times. Guy going to war. But it did stand out as something different. When, like I said, you put that picture up on YouTube on the thumbnail and they're like, what is this? Jerry Lawler is in an army outfit. Jeff Jarrett's got paint on his face. What is this? And people clicked on it. So, but it's exactly like Josh said. You can come out dressed like this and you can present it as something serious and we're mad and we're going to war, or you can present it as something silly. And I think Scotty even mentions in the commentary of this next match where they look like Hogan's Heroes or something, or F Troops, another good example, like Josh said. So, in many ways, I think it was kind of a miss, but we'll talk more about that later on. Next up, we see PG-13, JC Ice and Wolfie D is going to be taking on their nemesis, the main nemesis they've had here in USWA so far, Uncle Nightmare Danny Davis. But he's not teaming up with a referee this week. Mm-hmm. He is teaming up with a guy that we're seeing for the first time on television, at least, Randy Rockett. And so these guys came in hot right out of the gate. And let's see and hear a little bit of the action, and then we'll talk about where it goes, because it didn't go where I thought it was going to go.
13 in the ring. Here comes Randy Rockett and Nightmare Danny Davis. And we're underway, Dave, with tag team action immediately.
Boy, it didn't take long to get this one going, did it?
No,
Randy Rockett and Danny Davis against PG-13. JC Ice is already out on the floor complaining here.
First look at Randy Rockett in the USWA. And boy, does he come in looking good with Nightmare Danny Davis in this match.
You got Danny Davis making the tag on Randy Rockett and Wolfie D begging for mercy.
Look at that. All these illegal tags. Guys are just jumping in the ring. It's preposterous, Dave Brown. I'd like to see some law and order. This referee's the worst. He's a disgrace to the sport.
Well, our guest commentator, Scotty Flamingo, has just insulted virtually everyone, except you and me, Corey, and I have a feeling that's not far behind.
Yeah, you know, Dave Brown, if I were you, I would be mad at your barber, because he left a hole in your haircut. They deserved it. They're a bunch of no-good hooligans at Hogan's Heroes, Colonel Flynn group they got there. Keep this up, they're going to snap poor JC Ice's arm in half.
Danny Davis leaps over, and look at that. Wolfie D catches him right in the back with a leg. Danny's out on the floor, wraps him into the ring post.
Yes, the tide has turned in favor of my dear, dear friends, the PG-13.
Nightmare, Danny Davis fighting his way back. Lefts and rights, and trying to get over and tag his partner Randy Rockett in there. Randy goes over and grabs JC Ice.
Apparently Rockett's had about enough of this. He's just jumped into the fray. That referee ought to toss him out. JC Ice did it for him. Look at this.
JC Ice got Randy Rockett over here by the deck.
And look out.
Hey.
Hey, look at those illegal punches, Dave Brown. Somebody needs to put a stop to this.
Hey, come on, Flamingo. Stay out of it. Now, if you want to be out here and comment.
All right, so we're going to go back to this here in a moment, but let's talk about what we've seen up till now. So you got this new guy coming in who looks like Southern Brutus Beefcake, I guess. He's got the sights that his Gorilla Monsoon used to say. It looks like a hand grenade went off in his pocket. So I'm thinking, you know what? They're going to take the heat on this guy. No, I'm wrong. They are in control right in the first couple of minutes until we cut Uncle Danny off.
Mm-hmm.
We wear Uncle Danny out to the point that Uncle Danny is juiced on Saturday morning television, which was not something we saw there in the studio very often at all. How surprised were you guys to see how this match started to unfold with them taking over on Uncle Danny and then Uncle Danny bleeding here on TV?
I ain't surprised at all. Coming out there looking like the Hamburglar. That's what happened. Good Lord. He got beat down so bad the referee just stopped this match. The referee was trying to help him out. He was like, I can't stand to see him lose again. I'm just going to call it.
So I'm not a fan of Beetlejuice Uncle Danny either. Like he had two outfits kind of like that. One of them had like a fucking nautical star or some shit on the ass of the tights as well. He wore those in Japan, but this was a different set, but same deal. It always reminded me of Beetlejuice, or like Richard's talking about, like he should be helping that dog steal some Cookie Crisp. You know?
Yes.
I just want to point out that wasn't me. That was my grandmother. Because when I see this man in another couple of weeks or whatever, whenever we're in Jackson, I don't want him going for my eye.
I'm gonna have to put over. Richard's a very spirit world oriented guy. He just got possessed by his grandmother, and that's who was talking.
You know, like Beetlejuice. You understand? You had the ties.
But seriously,
we went and saw the new Beetlejuice movie yesterday, so it's odd timing here.
Hell yeah! Did you get the popcorn holder?
No, Rosie was desperately wanting them in the theater we went to. Didn't have any of the Beetlejuice gimmicks, so needless to say, she was disappointed. But
boo! But yeah, you're talking about bleeding on Saturday morning TV. Like, they didn't get paid for this shit. You know, this was their commercial. If you want to get yourself over and sell some shit, you know, on these spot shows and everything, you go out there and you do it for free. So yeah, like, unless it was a big deal, usually nobody's bleeding. So yeah, this was like, it must mean this was really special.
So, all right. So a few things I want to cover real quick before we move to the second clip that stems from this. Number one, on the subject of Uncle Danny's tights, I agree with all the different analogies you guys made, but I remember as a kid in 93 watching this thinking, you know, there's another Danny Davis in wrestling that's known for wearing referee stripes in the ring. Why would you wear black and white stripes when an outfit look like y'all need to be tag team partners? That was my take on the outfit. The other thing is, again, this is a pretty good tag team match, and then it gets really wonky at one point. Uncle Danny just arbitrarily starts making his own comeback here. It's not a hot tag. He just starts coming back on these guys and just quits freaking selling. Like, Jamie comes and clubs him across the back. He doesn't even flinch. He just keeps beating on Wolfie and just ignores Jamie until Randy Rockett just comes in really for no reason and cuts Jamie off, because Davis at this point is no longer even in trouble. Like, he's handling both. Here comes Randy Rockett in. He gets shit canned out to the floor because obviously he has somewhere to be at this point. We get him over in front of the desk. Scotty Flamingo says, this guy's throwing punches, he's cheating or whatever he says. And he comes around, he kicks Randy Rockett one time, and that's it. Randy Rockett's done for the day. Like, Scotty Flamingo either kicked or kneed him. It was hard to tell from that angle. And this just takes Randy Rockett out. He spends the rest of his time trying to crawl over the ring, trying to recover. Unless I missed another shot.
That was my favorite part of this match other than the ending. Like, Scotty is awesome on the mic. He's like, he's illegal punches. Somebody's got to do something about this. And fucking Spartan kicks him. Yeah, I mean, like, he legit he kicked the shit out of him. So now, he didn't kick him in the head, though, so I don't think it should have put him out unless he hurt a rib or something.
Yeah.
It kicked him in the liver, and that's a devastating shot. Now, I will say, I'm going to bring it back around. I'm going to connect dots that don't need to be connected here because I feel like I'm working too hard for him. Raven, later on, was very well known for that loaded boot, and maybe this is the start of it.
we missed the spot. They didn't have the camera on him when he kicked it against the floor 3 times and loaded it, a la the grappler, Robert Fuller, all those guys that had their loaded boots back in the day. We could do a whole podcast on the psychology of the loaded boot. Like we talk about how silly everything is today and how real it was back then, but we used to believe the guy could kick the toe of a boot against the mat 3 times. It moved something into place that he could kick the guy. And then when he bounced the heel of it against, it moved it back to where if the referee was to check it again, he would never know that the loaded part of the boot was there. Kind of like back in the day when guys put out people out with a sleeper and the only person who could wake them up was the guy who put the sleeper.
It is that man's responsibility to wake that man up. He has to wake him up.
And they were like a real heel. Like they would talk about this guy, he could die. Like you can't leave him unconscious this long. He's got to wake him up. But the heel wouldn't come back in and wake him up. They act like, well, we're done. This guy's never going to wake up now because the only person that can bring him back is the guy who applied the sleeper hold.
Try loading your boot and kicking him in the head. Maybe that'll work.
When Cornette goes on these rants about how stupid everything is now, I'm not saying that there isn't a lot of stupid shit happening now, but when you defend it with back in my day, we didn't do stupid shit. Like, no, there was a lot of stupid shit that was just acceptable. Yeah. And you booked a mummy and a Ninja Turtle, so maybe you should settle down a little bit. But anyway, they go back in the ring after Scotty has taken out Randy Rockett in his debut. PG-13 go back in the ring, and now they're double teaming poor Uncle Danny. Looks like the end may be near for him when this happens.
Yeah, good move too, Dan. If those guys didn't have enough trouble, he has to get involved in the whole thing. Yeah, all of JC Ice and Wolfie D, and they're really working on Dan after they double teamed him and hurt him early in the match.
I think you're about fed up with this first family as much as I am.
Boy, they about had it with that Flamingo.
PG-13 now in their double teaming Danny Davis. Randy Rockett is out after Flamingo jumped him from behind. They DDT Danny in the middle of the ring. And no control in there. Can't get any help for Danny.
They hurt Danny early. Randy was trying to help out. And then when Flamingo hit him not once but twice from behind, now he's hurt out here on the floor. So the team is not able to function here. The referee's calling for the bell.
Yeah. Well, Randy also. Hey, here comes the Master of Terror. Oh, look at
What's he doing in here? He's going after PG-13.
Master of Terror jumps in. And boy, he's going after PG-13 in there, Dave. I don't know what he's doing, but I'm glad to see him.
Man, me too. I really thought he was going to come over and hammer Danny Davis. And the battles these guys have had.
Yes, sir. Oh.
But he's out here helping out Danny and Randy Rockett working against PG-13. I don't understand, but I'm with you. I'm glad to see it.
Yes, sir. It's good to have him to come out and help Danny out in there. Power slams JC Ice. DDT, sir, Wolfie D. Boy, the Master of Terror comes in strong, jumping on PG-13 in there. Wolfie D gets up, heads out. There goes JC Ice. And it's good to see the Master of Terror just in the nick of time.
Yeah, it looks like we finally got PG-13 headed out of here. Wolfie D's got the hubcap. And there goes JC. Master of Terror's got him. Oh, we'll take a break. We'll be back in just a moment.
Okay, so PG-13 beat on Danny Davis until they're blown up. They keep looking back towards the curtain like, Jesus Christ, is this guy ever going to come out? Like, they've run out of shit to do. And finally, from the curtain comes our saving grace, the Master of Terror. Now, the Master of Terror, who has been booked pretty much like a straight-up jobber for the last 2 or 3 months since, Bill Dundee left and his other Master of Terror partner left, comes into the ring and absolutely owns PG-13 for a good couple of minutes. Unloads on them with power slams. He's hitting DDTs. He just whips their ass by himself for a couple of minutes till they finally flee the ring. Now, some of you may or may not know this. There's kind of irony to this. I don't know if this is one of those things where it's kind of like, well, we'll just do this. And the people who know, they know. And the people they don't, they'll wonder. Of course, Master Terror's Danny Davis's longtime partner, Ken Wayne from the Nightmares. But we don't mention that. We go to a break and then we come back and Uncle Danny's out there. He's cleaning the blood off and everything. And we'll get to that in a little bit. We're not quite there yet. So before we get to Uncle Danny's promo and how the rest of this plays out, what do you guys think of the Master of Terror running in here to save Uncle Danny and how the beatdown of PG-13 played out?
He got every move in his arsenal out, didn't he?
And some I think he was pulling out for the first time.
There was one, it looked like he forgot. He's like, I ain't hit this many moves in months. And he grabbed him and it was like, I've forgotten how to do a DDT. He like tried to hook him for a suplex. Just said, fuck it, I'm gonna do this. And fell.
He put Jamie on his head with that one. I mean, it looked rough.
It's like he lost control, and then he got out of the ring and started chasing him around the ring. He's like, I'm getting my shine, motherfuckers. Let's do this.
While Randy Rockett's still selling that kick. Uncle Danny's barely bleeding because that studio's cold, as you were mentioning earlier. He's like, God, I can't get this blood going because it's freezing in here.
He forgot to take his aspirins.
I don't want to get this back to my grandmother too much, but I know that I have ruined Mr. Uncle Danny for a lot of people because of my grandmother. But when like I said, I was watching this at the gym, and when Danny was trying to come back, and they're going, Danny, Danny, and the announcers are calling him Dan, and they're like, come on, Dan. And he's like, Danny, Danny, and they drop another fist or two on him, and the referee's like, ring the bell. My grandmother in my head made me laugh so hard because I could hear her go, yep, that's what I thought. Might as well not even chant his name, just call somebody else, scrape him off the mat. It's just, she has ruined seeing Danny in any kind of peril, or even when he's winning, it's just like she's ruined it for him. But yeah, everything about this was like it was hilarious because he was trying to come back and fist drop, now ring the bell. That's the one that did it.
Went too far.
Even when he's winning it, you hear her saying, "This ain't gonna be long. This ain't gonna last long," and it don't.
Go ahead and enjoy them wins while you can. There's a reason why you paint that star on your face. You're just tracing it from the ones you see in your face when you get hit in the head so many times.
No, she's pretty brutal. I figured she'd say something like, you paint that star on your face, 'cause that's the only one you're going to see. You look in the mirror, you see that star. That's it.
I don't hide my identity too, losing that much. I wouldn't want people in the grocery store to recognize me. I'd paint my face all up.
I interviewed Wendell Cooley the other night, and I felt like he was channeling your grandmother because I was talking to him. They did this failed heel turn where like Wendell was like the top babyface in Continental in 87, and just out of the blue, no build up, no, how like back in the day you start dropping little hints and you start seeing, okay, this is where they're headed. No, just one night out of the blue, Wendell turns on Danny Davis and joins the stud stable. They've paid him off and he's joined the stud stable. And I was like, all right, Wendell, because Wendell just talked about like, man, they were pushing me. I was the number one baby face. When Heaven Lane a lot like Dixie hit, everybody went nuts and I was getting pops every night. I'm like, that's absolutely true. I experienced it. I was there in Columbus and that's absolutely true. We all loved Wendell Cooley. I was like, so why did they try to turn you heel? And so as he's kind of explaining it, he's like, I feel like maybe if they had turned me against a stronger, more over baby face, and he said, nothing against Nightmare Danny Davis. I like him. He's a great guy. He's like, but if maybe it had been somebody more over. And in my head, as you just pointed out, Richard, your grandmother lives there. Whenever Danny Davis, like suddenly your grandmother just pops out my head, you're like, well, hell no, I didn't like give a damn and turn on Danny. I was like, I wish Richard could just show up right now and say, I'd be like, Richard, what would your grandmother have said about him turning on Danny Davis?
Well, ain't no turn. He's just joining in. Wow. Everybody else is beating him. That's an easy win. It's how you get title shots. Shit.
We'll talk a little more about that after this next segment. But right now, we come back for another pre-recorded promo from the Macho Man. He's still standing from that same fountain. He's still sporting his same Headlock for Hunger t-shirt, because while he is a bad guy in Memphis, he's not a bad person. He still cares about hungry, starving children. But anyway, he's talking about Oxford, Mississippi and Jonesboro. He's coming there. And I just wish that, Savage hadn't recorded this 2 or 3 weeks ago, where he could have known him and like, Lawler, I thought it was over, and then you jacked my music, Lawler, and it was my music because it said, oh yeah. So we're not going to play the clip. It's a lot of like what you heard last week, other than just now he mentions Jonesboro and Oxford instead of just Oxford. But kind of cool hearing Savage talk about coming to Ole Miss soon. How did y'all like this one compared to the other one, or was there really no difference?
I got the feeling that Macho Man was living in a tent outside that fountain. Like, I really support the hungry kids. I want to live like them. I'm living in a tent outside of this. Haven't bathed in 2 weeks. That's why I'm wearing the same shirt. Yeah. But yeah, that was
I'm
my
living off of Slim Jims and gas station diet pills.
Yeah, dig it. Dude, I was like, they couldn't pan the camera to, just turn the camera around. He don't have to be in front of the same fountain. It makes it look like we definitely didn't record this all in one day. Yeah, no.
I want to think that the camera guy's like, all right, Randy, you want to find another spot? Fuck it, it's Memphis. Roll it.
Right.
Oh no, it was probably like, this is literally probably what happened. How many promos do you want? 5. Let's do them all now. I got 10 minutes. It was like, that's what you're getting. I've got 10 free minutes. Here we go. I'm outside this big ass fountain. Let's do them all.
Randy, you literally have 1,000 jackets and 10,000 t-shirts. Do you want to change for each one? No.
Bonafide spot shows.
Trying to get the word out on hunger. Yeah.
You got something against starving kids, brother? Huh?
Are you for
showing your true colors? I'm saving kids over here, all right? But, so then we hear from Lawler and Jarrett, who finally get around to the real business of plugging some softball and an appearance at a sports card show at a Western Sizzling Steakhouse. You cannot make this shit up, folks. Only on Memphis Wrestling are you going to have the King, Jerry Lawler, your unified world champion, the general of a freaking army, take a moment like, hey, we're going to be at the sports card show at the Western Sizzling Steakhouse.
And dude, he was the most excited about that card show.
Yeah.
If any other thing that he plugged, it was that Western Sizzling card show that was the most important thing.
And I'm going to tell you right now, you talk to someone, an older person in our neighborhood right now, Western Sizzling is still over. They are mad still that Western Sizzling closed down 20 years ago here in our town.
And Richard's not bullshitting. It closed down a shoot 20 fucking years ago, and people still fucking talk about it.
I miss Western Sizzling. They don't even have the same building there anymore. Like, it's been bulldozed, and they're like, should have built Western Sizzling back in there. Ain't been nothing good in our town since that left.
Well, unfortunately, we still have a Western Sizzling in Gadsden, about 5 miles from my house, and my father-in-law, who's in his 80s, thinks that's really the only restaurant you should ever go eat at. Like, we tried to take him to a nice steakhouse, and he was like, you get a steak like this at Western Sizzling for, at the time it was like $15, We're a bunch of marks because we're going to Longhorn, we should just as good at Western Sizzling. I'm like, Raymond, it's not just as good. Okay, it is cheaper.
Yes.
I'll give you that. It's not just as good.
That ain't real cow on that steak.
No, it's just like OJR. Tougher than a $2 steak. Well, it's what you get for $2, pal. But after the break, Uncle Danny comes out and explains that he's somehow pieced together what happened. He gives a long, convoluted story, but Josh, do you care to kind of sort of see if you can recount the interaction between Uncle Danny and the Master of Terror and how we get to Monday night from what we saw in this segment? Or,
well, first off, it's the Master of Terror. That's Terror. That's how he says it.
He's got his cards and everything.
But yeah, essentially, it was Master of Terror comes out and he saves Uncle Danny because he doesn't want anybody else to whip Uncle Danny's ass, essentially. And he said pretty much that the PG-13 were just some punks. And you know that goofy walk that they do all the time and all this, and they're in the back bragging about beating Danny Davis up, and that pissed Master of Terra off. So he came to make the save, potentially just to keep Uncle Danny the lamb, if you will. His lamb, not anybody else's.
I do want to point
Which
out.
sounds fucking crazy when you think about it. And Uncle Danny's like, well, that don't make no sense. You're right.
I'm sure that sounded better in his head until he got trying to explain it on TV. And I'm sure as he was saying, it's like, this is stupid. I just love to hear. I mean, I know we've gone to this well a couple of times, but I think it's worth mentioning. I can just imagine what Richard's grandmother's saying at home as she's listening to Uncle Danny recount this freaking promo, trying to explain the convoluted reasons he's tagging with his old tag team partner, who we're not supposed to know is his old tag team partner, who only wants to be his partner so he can take him out, not let this other team take him out.
Danny talked to that man for 15 minutes in a commercial break. He didn't realize that was Ken Wayne. He tagged with him for years. He must have something wrong with his ears, because I mean, his voice didn't change. He's stupid.
I figured she'd say something like, "You say you take such a good ass whooping, and everybody wants to do it."
Yeah, he wants to team up with him because he knows he ain't the one going to lose. He's going to
tag.
Yeah, that was my takeaway, though. Is like Danny comes out and he's like, I had a long conversation with this man. It's like, you never once thought, hey, you sound a lot like Ken Wayne. And come to think of it, I haven't been able to call him lately. I think we've got some beef.
Didn't me and you used to wear these outfits when we were in the Galaxians or something?
Right. It's all coming back together.
I've got the same outfit in my closet at home, actually, now that I think of it. But he comes and he's very specific. He's like, if you want a team with me Monday night, all you have to do is walk out here, stand right here, and tell me that you want to be my team partner. And Master of Terra comes out the curtain and gives the old Fonz and now we've got a tag team match added to the card.
Corey and Dave were confused, though. They're like, what does that mean?
Yeah. Danny's like, shut up. It's he agreed.
That's the yes. If he talks, we're going to know it's Ken Wayne.
Let's just move on, folks. Yeah, because that one week when he yelled from the ring at Jeff Jarrett, won't you come on in here and show me how tough you are? I'm like, my God, if you don't know Ken Wayne's voice.
Yeah. I
mean, that is definitely him. Just I don't know, man. I did not see that coming when that match started. I did not expect it ending with a Monday night match with Danny Davis and the Master of Terra against PG-13. And I might add, one thought I had watching that match earlier too is if there is a special recognition in the Memphis Wrestling Hall of Fame for mullets, Wolfie D should get I know they're going in the Hall of Fame, but he should get a separate plaque for like best mullet of 93. Because I mean, he had the perm going with the mullet and everything. It was something to see. Match number 5, the final match of the day here in the studio, the Moondogs spot and splat with, I guess, Colonel Richard Lee or Corporal Richard Lee or Private Richard Lee. I don't know. He's got his beret on, and they're taking on the Shadow and the Scorpion. And this is exactly what you think it would be. It's the Moondogs squashing a couple of guys while wearing camo, or at least for part of the match anyway. But the first family hit the ring, obviously. You know, who could have saw that coming? Which eventually Jerry Lawler and Jeff Jarrett, who apparently were across the street practicing for their softball game or some shit, because it took a long time for the inevitable save to finally happen, but eventually it did. They run in, and now we are ready for Dave and Corey to run down the card. But first, let's take our second and final podcast commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to find out the card for Wrestle War 93.
This is Wrestling Nostalgia, the podcast that dives into wrestling history. Hey, wrestling fans, I'm Dave Dynasty, and if you enjoy podcasts that are knowledgeable and history-driven, then Wrestling Nostalgia is for you. With great guests and fun interviews, there are over 200 episodes in our archives. We chat with several first-time guests and often cover topics not discussed on other podcasts. Look up Wrestling Nostalgia on your favorite podcast platform and visit all of our links at linktree/WrestlePod. That is linktr.ee/RASSLEPOD. And remember, wherever you go, whatever you do, be good, be safe, and keep on growing.
Hey guys, this is Wolfie D from PG-13. Check out my podcast, Live and in Color with Wolfie D, every Monday at noon. We're talking Memphis, we're talking ECW, WCW, WWF, everywhere that I've been. We even have some great guests, some Hall of Famers on the show with us. Every Monday at noon, Live and in Color with Wolfie D.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling, the podcast that's based on the old school, but can still help you find the good stuff from today. Jimmy Street and the Plastic Sheik, Jarrett, are the undisputed tag team champions of the wrestling podcast world. From thought-provoking topics to superstar interviews to action figure expertise. This team does it all, and all they ask is, give me back my pro wrestling! Every other Thursday, wherever you listen to podcasts.
All right, there we go. We heard from our, as Wolfie D would say, our dope-ass sponsors. So now, let's hear Dave Brown and Corey Macklin tell us the entire card this Monday night for Wrestle War 93.
Gaylord going against the Rock and Roll Phantom. Follow that with Scotty Flamingo against Randy Rockett. And the way Scotty Flamingo jumped Randy from behind on the floor a couple of times here today, I got to feel like Randy Rockett's going to be ready for Scotty Flamingo. Coco Beware against Brian Christopher. Southern title will be on the line as Bobby Knight, one of the Harlem Knights, will be going against Jeff Jarrett with a Southern title at stake. That added match, we're going to add the match here. PG-13 will have to face Danny Davis. It's an unlikely pairing, but Danny Davis's partner will be the Master of Terror. After that, the unified title is at stake. The King, Jerry Lawler, brings the belt, puts it on the line against Nelson Knight of the Harlem Knights. Tag team titles on the line. The Moondogs with Richard Lee against Simply Divine, Rex King, and Steve Dahl. Then you got the Wrestle War 93 main event. Lawler, Jarrett, Moondogs, Richard Lee against Mike Samples, Scotty Flamingo, Harlem Knights, Brian Christopher. 7:30, it all begins. Wrestle War 93, Monday night at the Mid-South Coliseum. We'll be back here in just a moment.
So there's the card, which begs the question, was Scotty Flamingo wrestling Randy Rockett before he kicked Randy Rockett, or is he wrestling Randy Rockett because he kicked Randy Rockett? The world may never know.
And they just added the card to the match, and they have the quickest graphics people of 93 that they got a graphic made in 20 seconds, really.
Yeah, that was lucky they were able to get that thrown together there at the last moment during that Moondogs match. And my biggest takeaway from that is we're seeing a rematch between the Rock and Roll Phantom and Jeff Gaylord, and we didn't see either one on this week's television show. I mean, I need a Jeff Gaylord promo to really sell me on this match we got coming up. I'm disappointed. Are you guys sad we didn't get another marathon Jeff Gaylord promo?
Not at all. That was terrible.
Yeah, honestly, man, I think he broad brushed every single thing that was about Jeff Gaylord in that 4.5 minutes last week. I don't think, unless he does something else significant in wrestling, that he could add any more notches in the belt. You know what I mean?
So what I'm hearing is, as far as you're concerned, we may never need to hear another Jeff Gaylord promo for the rest of our lives. And if that's what you're saying, I will co-sign that right now.
I think he did
we
it.
can just get that in writing.
Yeah, I think he did it. And we're good. He got his interview time out. We don't need to see that again. I don't have any more to add. That was just.
I have to say again, folks, if you want to follow us on Facebook, I've managed to get what may be my favorite screenshot from a TV show of all time, where Jeff Gaylord's in the middle of his promo. He's pointing at his head with both fingers inside of his head, and Corey Macklin is in the background and could not give any less of a fuck. I've never seen somebody look so disgusted during a promo. It's my favorite screen grab ever. It captured. If you'll go watch that promo, if you can't tell me that Corey Macklin's face represents everything you feel watching that 4.5 minute promo, then I don't know. We're just different people, I guess. So
some of the comments in that picture that you got too on our Facebook group it's really taken off. It was fun to read some of the follower comments, man.
And keep them coming, folks. I really enjoy getting to hear people's comments and the on the page and in the group, and seeing that most people feel like we do. They understand it's not all great, it's not all bad, and sometimes you just got to have fun with it. And I so far, knock on wood, I don't think we've offended anybody with any of our opinions here. So
we'll find out the 21st, that's for sure.
Well, that's true. And if I hadn't made a couple of small edits to the last episode, there might have been a couple of complaints, but I did that more so for the benefit of WrestleCopia than us. When I listen back to it, I'm like, I would put this out, but I don't want to put Ray in that position, so I cut a couple of things out.
Looking at you, Josh.
Josh is smiling. He's like, I didn't say it, y'all did. Because Josh's comment made it in the show. It was my comment to his comment that I cut out.
So I got the heat. What you're saying?
It put a new twist on. You could throw your hands up and go, oh, I didn't mean it like that. But then when I double down on it, it's like, well, that could be a problem. So.
I know what's in my heart. What's in yours?
You know what the greatest part is? We didn't bring it up again. We just kind of let it go.
We didn't create huge demand for it that we may eventually have to put it on Patreon, where you'd have to pay to hear what it was we said to see if it's actually as offensive as we're alluding to. Do that. All right, guys, it's that time. Let's ask you those all-important questions and see how you felt about today's episode. Now, to avoid the debacle we've had through this entire podcast, for question number 1, we will let Josh answer first and Richard answer second. Question number 2, we will let Richard answer first and let Josh answer second. And on question 3, surprise us. All right, number 1.
3 questions? Oh, yeah.
Yes, there's always 3 questions. What was your least favorite part of today's episode, Josh?
Definitely the Moondogs match. Like I've figured out, these last few weeks, I'm not too big of a fan of the babyface Moondogs. And once again, no weapons whenever they come into the match. And, it's just kind of boring whenever you see the Moondogs up there punch kicking and not really doing very much. The Harlem Knights are big guys as well, but they've done at least 5-6 more moves than the Moondogs did in their match. And blatant cheating, like they're supposed to be baby faces. And Larry Latham, he fucking takes his jacket that he had on and gives it to Splat, and they do a double team clothesline with the fucking jacket. And Kevin Christian just sitting there looking at him. It's the Moondogs, and then the match goes on forever. It seems it was taxing watching it. It's whenever it's a Moondogs match, I want it to look like a fucking junkyard in the ring after the match. And it is just clean as a whistle besides their jackets laying around. Like I said, it took forever. And then Lawler and Jarrett come in to make the save because inevitably it was a run-in of some sort. I can't even remember. But either way, it was a run-in of some sort. Lawler and Jarrett come in and they have the fucking weapons. They have trash cans. That's what took so long, was they were still at the hardware store checking out, getting those brand new trash cans. And that's why it took long to get there with them.
Yeah, I mean, why not put Jeff and Lawler in a tag match? Let Scotty and Brian and the Men on a Mission run in on them, and let the Moondogs swoop in for the save with the hardware. Would that not make more sense than having the Moondogs in a match where they're not using weapons and they have to be saved by Lawler and Jarrett, who bring the weapons? Yeah, great point. Richard?
Yeah, my thing is, and Gene, you probably know about me. Josh, you definitely know this about me. I'm a big fan of originality. Now, I cannot think that there's not wrestling angles and wrestling things that have been reused. I know that, everything that's done in wrestling is already done, but it bothers me when you're not original. In fact, Gene, I tried stand up at your place last year, and it came to my attention that one of my jokes was very, very similar to another person's. It bothered me for like months that I was like, because it irks me when things aren't at least an effort made to be original. Yeah. This whole Wrestle War thing really just it set bad on my stomach. And then when they come out to the Macho Man's theme, and it just felt like, are we just basically cutting and pasting from different promotions now? He's like, and why not bring the Von Erichs and the Freebirds out to have a match, like a feud during this whole thing? If we're copy and pasting, why not? Here's the Handsome Stranger and the Dark Patriot, throw different things in there. We'll see what holds up. It just bothers me. It bothers me when things are not original. And I guess the Wrestle War thing, the Macho Man music, I was just like, come on, we can do better than this. You don't have to do this. You can do anything but this. You could still do like a war angle. Just come up with a better name. So I guess the unoriginality part was my least favorite of the night.
And for me, I thought, well, you did all the run-ins. You're showing that things are out of control. People are able to just run in these match willy-nilly. So I thought, and you're calling it Wrestle War, I thought this at least was going to build towards a cage match.
Right.
But we didn't have a cage match. It was just a big tag match.
A standard 8-man tag, even a weapons match of some sort, or come up with
hospital elimination.
Right. You get one of those cages, and when somebody loses, you put them in that cage and lock them away in the shark cage. Something, but nothing. It was just a standard match.
All right. So, second question. What was your favorite part of today's episode, Richard?
So I will say that on the whole, I thought the show was a little bit for me because the Wrestle War thing. But these guys are trying. You had Brian coming off the top rope with a leg drop. You have Scotty Flamingo flashing that big hog all over the place. You got Danny, juicing on TV. They're trying. You got special characters, special dress for, an event. Even though I didn't like the name, at least they're trying to dress up. They're doing different things, trying to make you want to come out. So I will say kudos to them. One of my favorite things was they're trying. They're making an effort.
So for mine, it would have to be specifically the Brian and TD Steele match, because it wasn't just your regular squash match. I mean, like whenever there's the illusion of a contest, that's whenever I'm drawn in the most. It really seemed like TD was getting his shit in. Like, it did some reversals. He had a few pin attempts on Brian. I mean, it was a little bit back and forth opposed to just the standard Brian coming in there and eating his ass up. And then, to put the stamp on it, the Tennessee Jam, I mean, like I said earlier in this show, they did a replay at least twice, maybe even 3 times on this one show of the Tennessee Jam, and it looked so great. Now, whether or not it crushed TD's nose and face, that's debatable, but it looked great on camera. And being 10 years old, man, like I said, I absolutely wore the tape out, rewinding, trying to watch it again, trying to, because I was like a little professor trying to figure out, well, how'd he land to make his ass hurt the least? Because I'm gonna have to do this one day, that kind of shit. And I absolutely love that match.
I was rewinding the Scott Flamingo tape. Doing the same thing. Mine was worn out.
Look at that hog bounce whenever he jumps off that second rope.
TD Steele was unique in that people would go in there and just absolutely just smash him, like you were saying, and beat him. But when given the opportunity and people actually tried to work with him and give him a little bit, he was a credible and believable opponent. Even if he'd just gotten squashed 5 weeks in a row, the times when somebody like Brian would go in and actually try to work with him, and he could look good, in his little boxing spots he would do and stuff like that. So I thought they could have probably did more with the TD than what they did in the long run.
I don't know when this will come up again, so I had to bring it up. Did anybody else, when they were younger, at first when they heard his name, thought they said Titty Steel?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay, I thought that was because I thought we had a thing for a while where we were calling him Titty Steel, and
I'm sure we did.
Can't get a nipple
Especially
twister on
Corey
that
saying it. Titty Steel.
You got to go for the titty that's not steel if you're gonna get him with that nipple twister.
So last but not least, and I guess we'll just rotate since we went Josh, Richard. We'll circle back to Josh. Would this TV show have inspired you to buy a ticket to Monday night's Wrestle War if we were still back in 1993?
Josh.
Oh, it's me?
Yeah.
Well, when you said you would rotate, I thought, Gene, you were going to answer that, then Richard, then me.
Oh, I don't normally get to answer.
Which way are we rotating this? Either way, I'll answer.
I said we'll rotate it back to Josh, and then I asked the question, and then you were staring.
Maybe my internet lagged during that time. I think my brain lagged. Either way, honestly, man, I'm still pissed off about last week because, if I paid to go see last week's show, and, none of us mentioned this, but I think it was the beginning of this show, and I'm talking about the Memphis show, not our podcast. Dave Brown even comments, he said, we had a record number of disqualifications this past week, and blah, blah, blah. I think he was saying that to try to get over the War Games thing, to get it over. But, yeah, if I was in attendance last week, I am so pissed off leaving. I'm not going back this week because, like you said, there's no cage, and that's what a War Games is. Or, if you're having Wrestle War, there better be a fucking cage match somewhere, and there wasn't. And no weapons, no nothing. I mean, the Army garb is cool, but it just doesn't seem like this is a blood feud like it should be. So no, I'm not going Monday night.
2 weeks in a row for Josh not going. They're losing you. All right, Richard.
I think the important thing is, as a kid, I would have went to every one of these just because it's wrestling. Now knowing what I know, and as an adult and watching this, the two things that stand out to me is Wrestle War. Like I said, okay, it's not very original, but the other thing is, I noticed that there's a lot of repeat matches in there. Like there's a lot of Lawler's wrestling this guy, then he's wrestling in the main. Brian's wrestling this guy, then he's wrestling in the main. The Moondogs are wrestling these guys, then they're wrestling.
Yeah.
If you can't get more than 8 people there, I don't want to see it. Variety was my thing, even as a kid, but variety's my thing now, and I don't want to see the same guys in the same matches all night. So, no, I would probably not go to this one.
I'm going to be honest. When Josh was quiet for a really long time, when we first pitched to him, I was hoping he was building to hitting us with the Master of Terror, just giving a thumbs up with no context. But the fact that he had said no, then we couldn't do that. And I can't give that a thumbs up. I wouldn't have. I think the whole Wrestle War hoopla was probably to help take our mind off the fact that we didn't have a WWF guy coming in this week. It was just your basic USWA card of guys that we've been seeing week in and week out. Except we're seeing the debut of Simply Divine, Rex King and Steve Dahl. The future well done. So I do like seeing those names pop up. I enjoyed that team. So that's good. We're getting another heel tag team in the mix that's not going to be a Moondog / Harlem Knights style tag team. So that sounds promising at the very least. But right now, before we get to Monday night, let's take a look in Nashville on April the 10th. They got last Monday night show, as in the 5 DQs out of 7 matches. They drew 325 people with this show. The night after this show on April 13th in Louisville. Now, keep in mind, just recently in Louisville, we've had some pretty big houses with Macho Man coming in. They brought in, I don't know if we talked about this on the show or not. I can't remember. But as a test run for WrestleMania, they brought Undertaker versus Giant Gonzalez to a USWA card in Louisville that drew like 1,600 people. This card drew 400 people in Louisville. So we can say that card was pretty much a failure around the loop. So that brings us to April 12th at the Mid-South Coliseum. We drew 800 people for this show for Wrestle War. Opening match saw Jeff Gaylord pin the Rock and Roll Phantom. Second match saw Scott Flamingo pin Randy Rockett, or since they like dropping the Y off everything, maybe it'd just be Rand Rockett if Dave Brown was saying it. In the third match, Nightmare Danny Davis and the Master of Terra beat PG-13. In the fourth match, Brian Christopher beat Coco Beware via disqualification. All right, we can do one. That's fine. USWA Southern Heavyweight Champion Jeff Jarrett defeated Bobby Knight in a one-on-one match. Then in another one-on-one match, Unified World Champion Jerry Lawler defeated Nelson Knight. In the seventh match, brand new to the area, Simply Divine, Rex King and Steve Dahl pinned the Moondogs to win the USWA Tag Team titles on their first night in. And in the main event of Wrestle War, Scotty Flamingo, Mike Samples, Brian Christopher, and the Harlem Knights defeated Jerry Lawler, Jeff Jarrett, Richard Lee, and the Moondogs when Christopher pinned Jeff Jarrett. How do we feel about all that?
Why in the world was Steve Dahl and why was Well Done? Why were they winning the titles with no build up? And we can't put the belt on Scott.
Because at this point we were rotating, having the Moondogs drop the belts every other week. They would win them one week and they would lose them the next week. I mean, seriously, if you go back to the results, they have been dropping these belts literally every other week. And at this point, there was Austin Idol was running a promotion in Alabama that was trying to fill the void of Continental that was gone. And they were doing little TV tapings. It was going to be short-lived, as it turned out, but his top heel team was Simply Divine, Steve Dahl and Rex King. He was using the Armstrongs and Wendell Cooley. The Iron Sheik was there in all his glory at this time. They used Boris Zukov some. Quite the card of people. But yeah, they were starting to come into Memphis. They were going to start working with the USWA, swapping some talent back and forth between Alabama and Tennessee. And the first step in that was going to be having Simply Divine come in. And yeah, they beat the Moondogs, win the belts. Were not on this television. So they came in and won the tag team titles. The only time you heard them mentioned on this television, there was not a, hey, let's take a look at a match of theirs from Birmingham. Let's take a look at a match of theirs from Portland. It just gets mentioned when they run down the card. Hey, Simply Divine is going to be challenging the Moondogs. And so you would think that, much like Josh said about Lawler and Scotty Flamingo, you'd think, well, this match is just an afterthought. This is just going to be a title defense for the Moondogs. And these guys come in and win the tag team titles.
And if we're going by comparison of what was put over more, you would believe that Western Sizzler could come in and win those damn titles because they were put over more than Simply Divine. I couldn't even remember Simply Divine's name. I called him Well Done.
Yeah.
Yeah, usually you would get like a music montage to try to put them over if they've never been in the area or something. If you're going to make a big deal, just make a video of them whipping some ass to shout to the devil or whatever, something. But yeah, they didn't. The only time their names were mentioned was announcing the card, and they win the fucking titles. That's just extremely odd. But at the same time, maybe they had big plans for them.
Perhaps. We'll see how that plays out in the coming weeks. But yeah, it's kind of fun that a tag team that most of the fans in the Coliseum couldn't have picked out of a lineup before they got there that night are now the tag team champions. Now, something that I find very interesting, I hope everyone else does too. Like I said, I read about this in Burt Prentice's book, but I wasn't sure about the timeline. But as I was looking through the Wrestling Observer, just seeing if there was any news and notes about this time period, I found a very interesting note. On April 12th, Monday night, the same night that this card takes place at the Coliseum, Wrestle War 93, that draws 800 fans, Burt Prentice ran a Mid-American Wrestling show right down the road in Tunica, Mississippi, in a tent outside of one of the casinos down there. And he drew 715 people, just barely under what USWA drew. No TV, very little advertising, just some radio and throwing some posters out around Tunica, hanging flyers in these casinos. And here's the card that he did it with. Eric Fontaine defeated Ray Evans. Samantha Payne defeated Candy Devine. John Hawk, a.k.a. the future Bradshaw and JBL, wrestled to a no contest with Ron Harris. Yes, that Ron Harris. Damian Strange beat Pat Kealoha, whoever that is. Bull Payne defeated Tom Davis, a.k.a. Tom Burton, the Dirty White Boy, in Global and USWA in the Texas side of things. Rugged Rod Price defeated the Honky Tonk Man, who was still being advertised on today's show for house shows for the USWA. He's working the competition down here for Burt Prentice, which I'm sure did not please Jerry Jarrett or Jerry Lawler. And then in the main event, John Hawk, a.k.a. JBL, won a battle royal. So this thrown together show in a tent in Tunica, just a few miles out of Memphis, drew just shy of what they drew in the Mid-South Coliseum.
With no TV.
No TV. Zero TV. I don't even think they had TV commercials. I think they did a few radio spots and hung up some posters. And Honky Tonk Man, Samantha Payne, Candy Devine, and Ron Harris are going to be, and I guess Bull Payne. I mean, you're going to recognize some of these names, but they're all, aside from Honky Tonk Man, they're all undercard people for USWA. They're not anybody you think would have drawn on their own. So pretty interesting. I don't know what that says for.
I think back then, though, this is the early 90s. Like, the consensus was if it's a wrestling show, then it must be big time, opposed to now. And even in the early 2000s, where just any Tom, Dick, and Harry could run a wrestling show and just gather up some people and do it. Like this, to me, this was still in that time frame of, like I said, where if it was a wrestling show, it must be legit. It must be something to go see. And it wasn't like there was a lot of other things going on during that time. So I'm not surprised that it drew that much. I don't think that it would have done, fast forward 15 years later, he's not getting half of that in that tent outside of that casino.
Here's what surprised me. If it did it on a Wednesday night, yes, but this is on a Monday night. I have to think that, it's close. Tunica's proximity to Memphis, out of that 715 people, 500 of those 715 normally, if they're big-time wrestling fans, would have been in Memphis on a Monday night watching the King and that bunch. So 500 people chose to go sit in a tent in Tunica outside a fucking casino to watch this parade of wrestlers rather than go see Wrestle War. That's the part that gets me. Yeah, I know you could throw a tent up and Burt Prentice could pull people out of nowhere for wrestling shows, especially in this era. But being on the same night as Memphis, most of the time I would have thought that most people we got to go see this Wrestle War thing, how it plays out. We'll catch Burt the next time they wrestle in a tent wherever.
They were pissed off about them 15 DQs.
Yeah,
perhaps because there was one no contest, but there wasn't any DQs on the show. So
now, one thing I will bring up, Tunica, with being right out there outside the casino, you said you're going to get a walk-up crowd too. Now, some of that's not just advertising. Some of that's just I just lost my rent money on craps, and I want to see somebody suffer. Somebody other than me, you know what I mean? You're going to get that walk-up crowd. I remember we did a show in Tunica when I was working with Memphis, and the crowd was outrageously big. And, I was sitting there going, this is a pretty big deal. Like, it felt like a big-time show, and I think most of it was just walk-up crowd. People just being in those casinos just wanting to do something other than lose their money at the time. They wanted to go see something happen. They wanted entertainment. It's like they think they were going to Branson or something. They wanted a big-time feel. So yeah, those casino crowds are pretty good sometimes.
Well, From my understanding, from reading Bert's book, this was a paid show that he got the casino to pay for this show. I don't think this promotion was I think it was pretty short lived. It wouldn't be maybe 6 months after this. He moves to Jonesboro, starts putting together Ozark Mountain Wrestling, which was sort of, USWA's competition, at least in the Jonesboro market anyway. So I think we get maybe 1 or 2 more shows out of this, but we'll keep an eye on it and see if they run it against USWA again. If I can find results, we'll talk about them here and see how the second show differs from the first one. But I just thought it was worth mentioning that, there's Bert, who was just here on TV 2 weeks ago managing Scotty and Brian. And just that quickly after he's left, he's already convinced the casino to pay him to put on a show in a tent outside. And he's drawing numbers close to what USWA is drawing. So regardless of the details, it couldn't make Jarrett and Lawler happy that Bert's doing this, and it couldn't have made them happy that the Honky Tonk Man was there. And perhaps the most shocking part of all that is the Honky Tonk Man put somebody over in a tent outside in Tunica. So there you have it.
He confirmed there was no cameras. So he's like, "Oh, fuck it."
Yep. All right. We cannot have documented footage that I lost a match after Warrior squashed me in '88 at SummerSlam. That was the last one.
Yeah. Usually when somebody gets put over in a tent, either something really good happened or something very tragic happened.
Well, that's one thing, man. If I recommend, if you're a wrestling fan, especially in the South, if you can get your hand on Bert Prentice's book that Scott Teal put out, it's an interesting read. And man, anytime Bert found himself on the outs with a wrestling promotion, he would just move off somewhere or end up somewhere. And within a couple of weeks' time, he has managed to get TV. He's managed to get a venue. He's managed to get sponsors. And he's running a wrestling show somewhat successfully time and time again. It's pretty amazing. He was like the carniest of the carny. And a lot of times people take that as insulting. I don't mean it that way. I've talked to a lot of guys that worked for Bert over the years, and they're like, no, man, he was a salesman. Like, he could just go out and make shit happen. And he could sit down in these people's offices, and when he walks in the door, they could have just a completely foul opinion of professional wrestling and everybody in it. And by the time Bert was walked out, he's got a check in his hand. They're sponsoring his show, and and some TV station is going to put it on TV because of his past successes. So, I mean, regardless of what you think about Bert and his private life or whatever other nonsense, you got to respect the hustle that man, up to the day he died, he had made his living promoting wrestling long after any other promoters had stopped doing it. Most everybody was out of the business, and even if they were promoting shows on weekends and holidays and stuff, they had a job. That wasn't their living. And Bert didn't have a job. He made a living promoting wrestling pretty much his entire life. So that's something to be said for that, I think. But so today was an interesting show. It had some fun moments. It had some not so fun moments, but overall, I feel like if the main event of Wrestle War would have been a cage match or something like y'all said with a significant gimmick, it would have made it mean a little more. But all this hype for just a glorified 10-man tag match, including the managers, I think a lot of people, obviously based on what it drew, decided to skip it. But we're going to go into next week with a brand new tag team who are also brand new tag team champions. And we're going to be coming off Brian Christopher having just pinned the Southern Heavyweight Champion, Jeff Jarrett. So should be some fun stuff to cover next week. I'm looking forward to it. Is there anything you guys want to plug or say before we wrap this one up?
Just make sure to visit us on P3 Radio, all one word, over there at Spotify, Google, wherever you find your podcast. So that Google ain't still doing it, but don't go there. Speaking of salesmen and how well they are, I fancy myself a salesmith as well. But no, P3 Radio, iTunes.
I get my podcast at Western Sizzling.
Damn straight. Ain't been another good podcast come out since Western Sizzling. I like to go down there and watch that big TV they got mounted on the wall. Watch old Danny Davis lose a match while I'm eating me some fried chicken.
Some fucking sauteed mushrooms.
Oh hell, he's bleeding. I'm over here trying to eat a rare steak. Somebody's done cut his head on Saturday morning. What are we doing?
Oh, a Danny Davis win is just as rare as trying to find a rare steak at, at Western Sizzling. You don't get rare. Those are pre-cooked, sir.
I don't think we can top that one. And so on that note, folks, thanks for watching and listening. We will see you back here next week for more of the Retro Wrestling Review USWA podcast. Hey, folks, before we get out of here, I'd just like to take a moment to tell you we appreciate you checking out the podcast. And if you would, do us a favor, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast wherever you're listening to this right now, wherever you're watching it. If you'll just take a moment to either subscribe, to rate, and review, let us know what you think. We hope you're liking it. But even if you're not, let us know what you would like to see changed, and we will take that into consideration as we move forward. So we really appreciate any feedback we can get. Also, we just want to say how proud we are to be a part of the WrestleCopia brand of wrestling podcast. Ray Russell brings you something for everyone over at WrestleCopia.com. Check out all the great wrestling podcasts available over there right now. And for all things related to the Retro Wrestling Review podcast, you can go to USWApodcast.com and you can find links to everything we have there, our Facebook, our Twitter/X, our TikTok, our Instagram, our merch store. That's right. We've got shirts, we've got hats, we've got phone cases, we've got all kinds of great stuff. And it's all right there at our store. And you can find a link to it at USWApodcast.com. There's a link to the YouTube channel we're associated with, the Retro Wrestling Archive. You can find all that there. And if you have questions for us, if you saw something on the show that you have a question about or a comment about, if you've got some info to answer a question we have, or you had a question you want us to read on the air, if you want to work out an ad swap, if you want to have any kind of communication with us, you can go and send an email to USWApodcast@outlook.com, and I will get back to you just as quickly as humanly possible. And if you're a fan of Dangerous Conversations with Doug Gilbert, and if you've heard it, I know you are, check out DougGilbertPodcast.com for all things related to Doug's podcast. You can find links to our Facebook page for the show, our Twitter. You can find links to Doug's social media, his Twitter, his Facebook. All that's available there, plus a link to the YouTube channel. And if you have a question for Doug you would like for me to ask him on the air, you can send that question to DougGilbertPodcast@outlook.com, and we will get it added and it will get answered in a future episode just as quickly as we can work it in. So we appreciate you listening. Thank you so much. And we'll catch you here next week for more